Well, both prospective students and their parents experience a lot of anxiety when it comes to choosing a degree. In the cover story this week, Finweek took a look at the best degrees to study in order to rake in the big bucks later on in life. Joining us to take a look at this, Johann Redelinghuys Partner of Heidrick Struggles, Eduard Strydom MD of Agisa Legal and Executive Recruitment, and Riaan Steenberg, Director at Regenesys Business School. Thank you all for joining us today. Eduard, I'll start off with you and we'll talk about the value of an education to start off with. And because just looking at some of the numbers, I mean, it can cost up to R500,000 to send your child to university. Add on top of that the cost of books, the cost of accommodation, some spending money to boot, and you're looking at quite a large investment. But of course, when we're talking about education, do you think that in the world today it's still vital, essential?
Yes, I think it's absolutely critical to have a background, because at the end of the day, the degree is not necessarily what qualifies you. It facilitates you and essentially takes you forward from there in terms of the experience that you gain, and be that relevant experience that you bring forward that ultimately determines your income potential from a future perspective.
Johann, talk to us about the state of graduate unemployment or employment in South Africa right now.
It's quite serious. I think I've just been looking at some recent figures, and they suggest that there is not such a high level of graduate unemployment, but there's a high level of graduate confusion, because there are many people who graduate with degrees that don't lead immediately into a career or a particular slot within a profession. And those people are left adrift in South Africa and in many other countries, incidentally, because graduate unemployment is not only a South African problem.
In theory, though, shouldn't your degree prepare you for the job market? Isn't that why we study?
It prepares you in an oblique way for the job market with some degrees. Like if you did, for example, a BCom and not an accounting BCom, what would that prepare you for? You could go into marketing, you could go into supply chain, you can go into a whole bunch of other things. And people often come out of their degrees not knowing exactly where they will find their feet one day. They will, but it takes time.
And of course, then there's the BA degree, which everyone knows
yes.
is called in some circles.
Hey, don't knock it.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
Well, exactly. I mean, it obviously does. It depends on how you use that. But you have to be, I think, strategic, and try and be as strategic as possible as you can be at the age of 17, 18. Where do you see the confusion in South Africa right now?
Absolutely. And I think what everybody is saying is that you need to decide what is your profession. Okay. And a degree, I like the word degree, because it says how good are you at it. Okay. And when you're a school leaver, you will earn in South Africa, the census says 6,800 Rand per month on average, and you will go and you will have a job that's going to be manual labor. It's going to be physically tasking, and you're going to have to look at how you're getting ahead. Your first degree will take your earnings potential maybe to about 240,000, maybe up to 360,000, depending on where you're at. Your postgraduate studies after that can push you to stratospheric levels of 750,000 upwards to 2 million. There is no person that will earn R1 million today that does not have a degree. So we cannot negate the value of a degree, but it is the profession that you choose at the end of the day that determines what you know. Okay. And I think for a lot of BA graduates leaving universities, my advice from a Regenesys perspective, from a business school's perspective, is to sit and say, what are you doing to get better at that? And that's what we see as a business school, is that people then later in their life start business studies to get better at understanding how the world of work works. So while you're young, pursue your dreams and passion, but later, let's take it further in terms of looking at what should I be studying so that I can run this place.
Johann, you do graduate recruitment and placements. What is it that employers look for in graduates?
I'm going to be very careful what I say about MBAs because but MBAs have lost a lot of their gloss because there are just so many of them these days. So what people look for is the less tangible elements of a person. For example, drive and skill at communication. Those are issues that stand out to a potential employer, almost more than qualifications do at this stage.
That is one point that Kathy Sims made in the article from the Graduates Recruitment Association. She says that a graduate is, or a degree is a license to hunt.
Yeah.
And it basically gets you a foot in the door.
Yeah.
And that, what I wonder is, what about people who can't study? What if you don't have the money to study?
Well, think about famous dropouts who've done spectacularly well because they were not channelized in a way that made them think in a very organized manner, and they've come up as great entrepreneurs in areas like technology, for example. Those are the exceptions, of course.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, aren't
They
these
are
the one in a million?
There are exceptions, but people don't all have to have a degree. There's some very good success stories without them, but in general, you need the license.
Absolutely, and the argument is very simple, to sit and say, can you afford not to study? And that's what I liked about the article, is it said, is a degree a natural hedge? Okay, if I took a loan today to study, will it pay back? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what's the return on that R500,000 rand investment?
Yeah, and time again, that return is there. I think some of the frustration is it doesn't happen immediately. Okay, it's not you're going to walk into a job tomorrow that's going to give you that money back. But if you don't study, lifetime earnings of a PhD graduate, that's 100 times that of a matriculant.
But I don't think we can, sorry Sam, I don't think we can disregard the fact that we live in a country where people struggle financially. If you want to be a top earner like the degrees we mentioned in this article, you have to study for almost a decade. People can't afford necessarily to not earn money for a decade to study. What alternatives are there?
And that's the reality of education. A lot of it is what we see at Regenesys is that it's moving online, it is moving into the workplace, it is moving into helping people be better at their jobs right now. And I really loved Johann's point in terms of saying, you know, it's really about exploring yourself and finding that holistic education, which is what we do at Regenesys, and really finding out what you can do to make yourself better and to drive forward with that. It's much less about you know, what did I study? It is about what drive am I putting behind this.
I think the degree is a point of entry. How you take it from there really determines your success, meaning that in the next 10 to 15 years, further study would obviously be of great importance because you would need to further qualify. But that would come with a degree of specialization. Once that occurs and specialization takes place within any industry at the end of the day, there is a guarantee of a much better income coming forward. So there's no doubt about that. But to do that initially is almost kind of putting, you know, the cart before the horse. It's not going to work. You need to kind of see the lay of the land, so to speak, from a work perspective, decide for yourself where it is you want to position yourself from a long-term point of view, and then accordingly decide what you want to study further.
But what happens often is you have students looking at potential future earnings and making their decision based on that. And I mean, if you just look at the SAGRA figures, I mean, the median salaries in 2013 for startup salaries, that is, for starting people entering the workforce, above 280,000, you're looking at investment bankers, engineers, and of course they're going as analysts there, but engineers and management and strategy consulting. So, I mean, it's really tough to get into those positions because they are far and few between in South Africa. Is future earnings potential a very important aspect to look at when choosing a degree? And of course, does the market change 10 years down the line and perhaps you could have been wrong-footed?
Well, of course, there's always a risk element attached to anything that you potentially undertake from a study perspective. But ultimately, at the end of the day, my view is as long as it's driven from a commercial perspective, and it will continue to be driven in that regard, I think you'll be quite safe because commercial is the common denominator, and that's never ever going to change. So from a future earnings perspective, as long as you're on that segment and you understand that gearing myself up and further education, etc., be that through higher diploma programs, not necessarily degrees, could further enhance my career opportunities, and with that also to a large degree better my income potential as well.
Johann, what are your views on this? Because there's always the question around passion versus money, essentially. And of course, some people choose a degree, sometimes based on passion, sometimes based on money. What's more important?
The point that I was going to make was within careers, there is a huge variation of earnings. There's some medical doctors who are living on the breadline at the moment because they just are in bad positions, they don't have good jobs, and they don't have the drive needed to achieve a higher level. The same applies to engineers and even accountants. Now, and lawyers as well. People at the top can earn a great deal of money, but people at the bottom are much lower than that. So it's not the whole profession that earns money or doesn't earn money.
So choosing to become a CA or a lawyer doesn't necessarily mean you're going to earn big bucks.
No, it doesn't exist. I think that is a perception, and I think that's exactly what it is. You know, people had that perception that if you're a lawyer, you're wealthy, and it's not the case. It really depends in terms of area of specialization. And again, in the context of the legal fraternity, commercial law is the most prominent area to focus on. So as long as you're in that area of focus and you continue to gain that relevant experience going forward, use it to your benefit, and obviously from there kind of build a career going forward, yes, of course, you will be guaranteed of a very good income because your skills are highly sought after. They are very scarce invariably, and it's not just a phenomenon to South Africa, it's a worldwide phenomenon for that matter. So you'll always be in that good space, so to speak. But as for the rest, I think one has to look at the more from an average perspective to say that, you know, if you're doing other areas of law like litigation or conveyancing or property law, you might not necessarily be earning what your counterparts are earning on the commercial sector side.
Yeah. Your views then on the question around how to choose a degree?
Choose a profession. Okay. Say, I want to be an accountant. Okay. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a marketer. I want to be a retailer. I want to do this for my life. I want to be on TV.
I thought I wanted to be a marketer. I did business science marketing,
yes,
and I ended up in this career, journalism. So, you know, you don't necessarily end up in the career that you think you set out for at 17, 18.
Excuse me, the best example of that is our Minister of Finance, who's a pharmacist.
Okay. But choose a career. That would be my advice.
Yeah.
Think about that.
And then once you're in that position, as my colleague mentioned, get as far as you can with that. Use your studies to support that. And I think of it in this way. If I started a business as a matriculant, I'll probably start a small business. Okay. If I started a business as a MBA graduate at Regenesys, I would try to start an industry. Okay, because I would have the skill and confidence and that inner ability to mobilize my spiritual and emotional intelligence to really go out there and do something different with my life. And that's what a degree should do for you. It should liberate your potential. And if it doesn't, and if you can't see that popping out at you when you're looking at a potential career, then you're going to spend R500,000 and you're not going to get your money back.
But Sam, I think you made a really good point. When you start to study, and I based this on myself, I had no idea at 18. Who knows at 18 what you want to, how can you choose a profession when you're that young? I will tell you that your first degree determined your profession. Okay, even if it told you what you don't want to do. So it's a chicken and egg kind of situation.
Yes, but you have to make that first choice. Your first degree is an amazing time. It is a time in which you will explore yourself, find out who you are, what you're doing on this planet. And every time an executive recruiter looks at you, they will sit there and say, what did this person do as their first degree? And if they swapped out of that, you better have a very good story to sit there and say, how did you take your career from there?
Also, just from experience, I mean, sometimes what you study and what it looks like on paper are two different things. So when an potential employer is looking at a CV, do they go through the tick list and they say CA, clever person, doctor, clever person, something else, okay, maybe middle of the ground? I mean, how important is that labeling when it comes to the degrees right now?
Sam, accountants tell you that when they are experienced and they've been around, they know that when they pick up the balance sheet of a company, they sense what it looks like. There's a certain feel about the whole thing. And it's true, that's true about a CV as well. It's not one box, it's not the other box, it's the overall feel that you get from the CV, whether you can respond to it or not.
Not very scientific though.
Not very scientific.
But the reality of the working world today is it's at such a fast pace. There are 7 billion people on Earth that are looking for a job. Okay, and if you can't make up your mind a company is not going to be tolerant towards that. It's going to judge you on what you have done, your track record, the way that you've presented yourself. And that is when your degree actually starts counting. It opens the door. It says, I am a lawyer, okay, I'm a marketer, I'm somebody that's in the entertainment industry. And then when you start looking at, oh, is it postgraduate, is it master's, is it which institution did they do it at, etc. That's when I start making judgment calls around this person. And that you need to do before you can even enter the door.
Choose a profession, do you agree with that? And what are your thoughts then, just in closing, in terms of advice you would give to people looking at choosing a career right now? We know matrics in South Africa writing exams, a lot of them thinking about what's for them in the future. Your advice for them?
I think regardless of the degree that you choose to study, my advice would be to work hard, to try and gain as best as possible academic results, because it plays a very, very cardinal role going forward. We sit in scenarios, by example, where we have individuals with nearly 15 years post-qualification experience where a client will still ask us for academic results and transcripts. And you think that's ridiculous, that was 15 years ago. Yet it is important for them, because from there they can take a measurement in terms of their own environment, whether they would be a fit from that perspective at the end of the day. So academics do play a very, very big role. And obviously, affordability is also there from a degree perspective. One has to consider good schools as well, because the branding of the schools are very, very important. You know, that might get you an interview coming from a good school. If you don't come from a good school, that might not get you an interview. So these are all factors that kind of play against you and for you, depending on what you choose.